And that's where it gets interesting to me, because you mentioned in the very beginning that the business you're creating, the focus on education, there's some assumptions in that this is the best way for you to make the impact you're trying to make, and that education is that important. And to that subjectivity point, this is the thing I probably struggle with most. And I've mentioned this before. I recently just read a book by Tolstoy. I don't know if you read it, JZ, called A Confession, where he talks about like the meaning of life. Really interesting book, really interesting book. But at the heart of it is this idea of, if we're constantly making assumptions, because we have to, because we don't have all the answers, if everything is at its core ultimately subjective, we can only see it through our lens, and that's quite literal, right? Because we can only process all the information we bring in, anything we read, any conversation we have, through our own minds, which has its own biases and flaws and all that. So in effect, we never know anything for sure. How do we ever have conviction to do anything, right? And let's make it very real in your case. So you did make some assumptions, and you said, okay, education is going to be the thing, teaching English is going to be the thing. You're super smart, thoughtful, philosophical. We could spend the next 10 hours debating if you're actually helping the world, not helping it, maybe it's neutral, or maybe even hurting the world. I'm sure we can make an argument for that if we really pushed ourselves by doing what you're doing. Maybe people would be better off not, maybe English is actually the problem. We can go any number of different directions. So how do you ever actually have conviction? How do you ever say, yes, I'm going to go with this assumption with confidence and drive it forward? And the way I often say it is, I think we as a human species have gotten very comfortable with this illusion, because we have to, that like, I don't want to think about all the subjectivity and uncertainty of it and the assumptions, because I have to make decisions. So I'm just going to tell myself, I know this is the right thing for me to do. But on a very academic level, when you actually dissect it, there's not much to it. It's just a bunch of guesswork that we're hoping for the best. So in a very simple thing, JD, like how do you make those assumptions? How do you do it with any confidence when I know your mind allows you to appreciate we don't know anything for certain, and we have no idea that this is the right decision or the wrong decision?
Terry, so man, again, so since we're now in the pure philosophical realm,
Yeah.
I think one of the assumptions, something to stand on. One, you see, one of the things is, and this is kind of my view on it, uh, we have like we clearly have, and I'm saying clearly have again with a certain amount of conviction. We clearly have two selves to us, right? There is a rational kind of thinking self, and then there is call it the heart, the emotional piece, right? And I feel that all the decisions that we make happen somehow as a result of collusion between them. There's a conspiracy in which the brain and the heart, the mind and the heart, are both involved in a certain way, right? And so I honestly think that our minds and our thoughts take us only so far, and at some point our liking, disliking, our emotional piece comes out and takes a decision, right? I mean, think about it. I don't know if it's the right analogy, but think about it this way: like, when someone meets, their significant other, right? I don't think it's a rational. I mean, it could be, but I don't think it's a rational decision. I mean, I feel that, like I'll give you an example. I was selecting. I had to pick between a few people for one slot, and I sat down and actually came up with a matrix for pros, cons of each person, and where, and which person, and while I was doing that, I realized that the person that I kind of already had decided in my heart I wanted to pick, I was giving them the score that I thought will get them, make them look good on the paper as well, right? So I think that it's sometimes, I don't know, but it sometimes is a mix of the emotions start to come in, right? And my point is that there is, and this is a view of what we're made of, but my view is that I think we have a soul and a heart, and that soul and a heart, which is beyond us, because I don't know, there's a part of me that refuses to be comfortable with the fact that there's nothing more to me than what I see with my eyes, right? And so there is a soul and a heart, and a piece of me that that I believe lives on, a piece of us that I believe lives on. And so there's always a decision, part of the decision making that happens through the heart, right? Things that where, and that's a separate debate around what influences our likings and dislikings, and how do our personalities develop, and what are those personalities a result of, and people are shy and confident and introvert and extrovert and all of that. But so coming back to specifically your point of how do we ever know for sure, my view is that maybe certainty is not, maybe part of the fun of this version of life that we live is the kind of haze that surrounds us, right? There's a kind of certain amount of uncertainty there is, in which we take decisions whose consequences we can only predict, but we would only know for certainty once we have walked on that path. And that in that process, as long as we are making decisions, so for me, kind of last point on this, for me, it's, I would rather say it's not whether that decision was right or wrong, because that might only be clear in hindsight. I think what's interesting to me is, whether those decision principles were in our mind the right decision principles, right? So did we do it for the right set of reasons in our view, right? So now, for instance, in my case, I don't know if I will be successful, if I will be able to create the impact that I want, and all of that, right? All of the kind of dream that I have. But in terms of what I know now and the decision principles that I have, if we are clear on that from a emotional perspective, maybe if our heart is comfortable with those, right? Because this might sound funny, but I think your heart is the ultimate judge of whether you're doing something, whether you're happy with what you're doing or not. I think there is a piece of us that, now that we're slightly older, I can certainly look back at my life and say, there is a piece within us that tells us that, you're not doing the right thing. We may still do it, but there is something that kind of hurts us inside, or pushes us or nags us to go in another direction. And if that's comfortable with the decisions that we're making, then I think, given the human constraint, maybe that's the best we can do.
See, I agree with, I think, everything you're saying, and I think it's probably right. My issue is, or my where I still grapple is that emotional part, that feeling that tells us. I think what you're saying, but correct me, is we can't, by definition, it's not the rational part, it's the emotional part. So it cannot be explained. It truly is just a feeling and some sensation. There's a leap of faith that comes with that, of just very much in what you're saying. And the rational side of my brain, when it looks at that, it says that may be true, and it may be right that that's the case. But because I can't explain it, and I can't understand it, I can't actually see it, I don't actually know if it's real. I don't know if there's substance to it or anything meaningful, or maybe even said a different way, even if I assume that is true, and we never actually know for sure, and it's kind of just, it almost feels like that thinking about things, being thoughtful, putting in work to learn more, a lot of the things you're saying with education shouldn't matter then, because at its root, it's just this faith in that, what our emotions tell us is right. And that seems wrong to me. It seems like there is benefit to, as you said, the process and thinking about it. But if at its root, it's just, there's something that we can never understand, and we just have to kind of accept that and go with it. The way Tolstoy said it, to bring it back to that book, the quote that I think about all the time is, he said, if I don't know who I am or why I'm here, then life's impossible. It's impossible for me to take any action or do anything, because I have no confidence in it. I can't explain it. I can't understand it. And I think you're right. It probably does come back to some degree of faith, where we have to just accept that and go. But are we willing to acknowledge that in that we have very little control, we have very little understanding, and we're doing the best we can with such a limited amount of information that it's almost I don't want to say it's meaningless, but it's almost meaningless because it's not grounded in anything. There's nothing we can hold on to say, okay, I know this decision is the right decision, or I know this is the way to be living. We're almost really just guessing. And that's a very uncomfortable thing. That's that illusion I mentioned before, where I think people don't want to accept the fact that we just spend, 80 or 90 years on this earth, ultimately guessing and hoping that our intuition and our feelings are leading us the right way. But that might be the reality of it. We're all just out here guessing, doing the best we can. And there's something deeply uncomfortable about that to me. But maybe, as you said, that's the beauty of life, and we should just embrace it.
Bro, I think so. Well, the only thing I'll add to that is that, in so a bit of a mathematical example, if you like, but
Yeah, I love that.
when you do, it's been a while that I did econometrics. It's been a real long time, but when we used to do econometric equations, you have this e at the end, the epsilon, like the Greek letter epsilon. So where essentially you're saying is that the bulk of the equation is being explained by the equation, but then there is an epsilon, which is like a random factor, right? So I think the bulk of the decision making can happen as a result of the processing, the thinking, the rational, the frameworks, the decision frameworks, and all of that. But then there's always going to be, all I'm saying is there's always going to be that epsilon, which might be the deciding factor in many cases, which might make the entire difference. That single speck, that single iota of no, do this, do that, right? No matter how much I am convinced that this is the right person that I should employ, but there's something about this person that, that's coming in, right? And whatever, right? And all the kind of, so all I'm saying is, yes, we have to work on developing the rigor in terms of the thinking process, but then given what we are, there's always an epsilon in us that we don't fully control. Like there are emotions, for instance, bro, think of it this way. This is just my view on it. There are certain emotional feelings that you cannot control with your mind, right? Like a parent would love their child, and it's kind of to me, it seems like a granted love, right? It's given. You don't have to learn to love your child, right? And nobody can, there are always outliers and exceptions, but generally bulk of humanity can't, even animals can't, rationally not love their child, can't kind of do away with that feeling just by thinking it out or thinking it away, right?
Can I ask that, just the present? So I agree with that. But if we do look at it objectively, does that mean it doesn't actually mean it? Like, I agree. I have a son, as you know, right? It's 8, same as one of your children. I love him deeply. But if I can't explain why I love him, does that, and I'm not saying it does or doesn't, does that make it any less real? Because I think the way my mind works, it says it has a very tough time accepting something as having meaning or being real if I can't explain it. It's not that it's not possible. It's definitely possible, but it's that point that I would never actually know for sure. If we can't explain it, then how do we know there's actually meaning there? And it's not just some random, hormonal secretion or some external influence that kind of drove us to something that's not like we've placed meaning on things because we're sophisticated enough intellectually and we experience emotions and we say, well, those emotions must mean something. But because we can't actually trace it back to say, oh, here's what it means, it becomes very difficult to actually accept it. So to that point of loving our children, are you okay with the fact that you may never know exactly why we love our children the way we do?